then, so we're going to carry on with our course on inner experiences one, and this is the fourth night of it. We're dealing with the center of the center, which is one of the key principles in this meditation technique, and stems from the principle of the middle way, which is what has also become another name for Buddhism in many places, is the middle way. So I'm going to deal with it on both on from a sort of exoteric, sort of general purpose meaning, and going all the way up to a very deep inner meaning to this. The word the middle way, strangely enough, in the scriptures, actually only really occurs. I found it twice when I searched through it, and nowadays the scriptures. So nowadays the scriptures are quite searchable. You can actually just type it in and you can search on a search term. So I did quite a lot of this searching for various things, and one of them was searching for the word the middle way. I think I only found it twice from memory. But the one place where it really stuck out was in the first teaching of the Lord Buddha, the very first one he ever gave. And in there, he's teaching, and each time he teaches, he's teaching to an audience, and you have to understand this. He teaches very differently for every different audience. It's very carefully designed what he's teaching. And when he was teaching to this audience, there were 5 ascetics who he had previously, before he became the Buddha, he had spent all his time with, 6 years together, and doing various ascetic practices of what we would call now self-mortification. They're kind of, sometimes you even see it nowadays. You see these sort of Indian fakirs sort of lying on a bed of nails, but there's actually dozens of strange techniques that are used, which are really unpleasant, some of them. And they really still do use them. It's carried on from very ancient past, these traditions. I remember when I was in a yogic ashram, and the yogi there was telling me about, they have this meeting in India where they all come and show off their tapas, or their ascetic practice. And one of them's standing on one leg. I've been standing on one leg for 3 months now, and his leg is huge, and the other one shrunk to a little shriveled up thing. Just constantly giving his arm up. Oh. Yeah, there's loads of them. And I was quite surprised. I didn't expect it to still be around, but it is. It's alive and kicking as tradition. And and well, in that time, he tried out other meditation types and gone to the deepest type of meditations that were around at that time, and decided it still didn't lead into where he wanted to, where he thought you should be able to get to, complete liberation. So he tried out what was in vogue, you could say, at that time, amongst these ascetics, and he many practices he involved. Some of them involved holding his breath, and until air would whistle out of his ears and out of his eye sockets, and torturous pain in his skull, for example. There were ones where he would eat very famously, where he'd just eat like a grain of rice a day. And so you see these many Buddha images where he's starved, and you just see his ribs sticking out, his belly's right back to his spine. And you see very famous images of that period of time, until he got to the point where he was verging on dying. And people, if you saw him then, you'd think he was dead. When he realized, not the way. Okay. So he actually, in his life, he'd experienced both extremes, because before he left the palace, he was living this incredibly luxurious life, deliberately so from his father's point of view, who wanted to try and prevent him from ever ordaining. His father had this goal of not letting him ordain. So he surrounded him with these 3 palaces, one for every season, I think it was something like tens and tens of thousands of dancing girls, let's say, and continuous amusements, the most beautiful wife you could find in the kingdom, or even in the world at that time. So basically, he had everything pleasure-wise you could have. He had it all at that time, and discovered that it still wasn't, even with that much pleasure, it doesn't stop suffering. Okay, because all of those will still get old and get sick and die, including him. So then he, has the experience of this other extreme, and that's who he's teaching. People who've gone to the other extreme, who thought that the way to overcome suffering, the way to overcome desire in particular, was this kind of various ascetic practices of self-mortification. And he'd experienced both of them and said, no, both of them don't work. They don't lead to the actual goal. And so he rejected them. And in his rejection of them, he then left that group and went on his own into the forest and went back to meditation. And it's actually been a key point here is, why did he go back to meditation when he'd already tried meditation and found it didn't lead to what he wanted, what the actual goal? And so when he did go back to meditation, what did he do differently this time? And that's actually a really deep question. He actually went to very sublime states of meditation before, what we call jhana states, complete concentration, or what they would call samadhi in yogic tradition. But they were focusing outside of the body. They were meant for concentrations outside of the body. And also, it was concentration for concentration's sake, for the experiences of these temporary mystical states of being one with everything. And there's actually 4 classic ones. I'm not going to go into them right now. But anyway, he didn't use it to gain wisdom. And once he went back to meditation, he did it in a different way. And that's what I'll be talking about in a minute. He went into meditating inside the body and not outside the body, in particular focusing on the mind at the center of the body. So when he looked at these two ways that we can get to happiness and get rid of suffering. One of them was sensual pleasure, have it, to the max. We found that actually sensual pleasure to the max, actually, most of the time, it creates even more suffering than you started with. Whether you're going drinking to the max, that's going to create you more suffering. Whether drugs to the max, that's going to create you even more suffering. Anybody who's known anybody who is an alcoholic or has been through drug rehab will know what I'm talking about on this. Okay, any of the sensual pleasures taken to the max in that way, that's going to cause you trouble. But even when they're not taken to the max, there's still this subtle bit there, which is actually going to create suffering of a form. Suffering here can have very subtle forms to it. Just that wanting, that needing, is already a state of lack of inner peace. Wanting, needing something is already a state of lack of inner peace. You're unhappy until you get it. And so when you can try and create real happiness, involves turning away from that, but at the same time, not wasting your time on something which is painful. Okay, pain is also not the way to happiness and peace. So he rejected that approach as well. So he gave this teaching about, I've rejected both of these. He's giving this teaching, why? Because he's teaching people who are still very attached and practicing this. So much so that they rejected him when they first saw him. They wouldn't pay him the proper respect. They thought that he was, not traitor is the wrong word, but someone who's let the side down, who's gone back on the real way of doing things. So he had this big skepticism on their part. Just saying straight out, the way you're practicing, but also the way that you're afraid that I'm practicing. They thought you're going back to eating. You're so indulgent. He wasn't stuffing himself. He's still having very small amounts of food, 1 meal a day. But compared to what they were on, it seemed indulgent. So he was saying, no, there's a middle way, and then he explained what the middle way was. Detailing in particular the Noble Eightfold Path, which I haven't yet taught on this group, but all right, it's coming. So going, he discovered this pathway, which was basically a meditative pathway. It involved meditation. And the Noble Eightfold Path, the last part of it is meditation, right concentration. And right concentration is defined as the previous 7 parts of the path. That is to say, the whole thing is about meditation. Okay. But put it into perspective here. We've got pleasure as the path of happiness and getting rid of suffering. Doesn't work. And we have pain as a way to get rid of our suffering and the causes of suffering, which doesn't work either. What he discovered was inner peace and inner happiness is a way that can lead past both of these. I'm putting it in a way which is not commonly understood. But if you actually understand the 4 Noble Truths, and the 3rd Noble Truth, that is, there is an end to suffering, and that is called nirvana, the ultimate happiness, ultimate peace, then this is what he's actually teaching. The goal is that there is this peace, this happiness. But it's an inner peace and happiness. Sensual pleasure he rejected because it's looking outside of yourself for something that's temporary, and when it's gone, you're unhappy again. And then you're waiting, you want another one to get yourself happy again. It's discovered that no, you can find something more lasting, permanent inside. And so this pathway of inner happiness is what finding a way in between these 2 extremes. Now that's the way that this is generally understood, okay, as the middle way. Now, it was only Lombo Wokpat Nam, who was the founder of this meditation tradition, who really discovered this deep inner secret, a secret because it's been lost for so long. But now we understand this concept of the center of the body, and it's really important. It makes everything in the scriptures comes to life. It suddenly makes sense in a way it didn't before for a long period of time. And that is that when we focus the mind at the center of the body, rather than externally, like the teachers of yoga that he was studying with before, when we focus at the center of the body, we can go inwards to inner states of happiness and peace all the way up to that state of nirvana, putting it very simply. The idea that focusing inwards rather than externally, and that's actually throughout the scriptures, is this idea of keeping your awareness internalized rather than externalized. When the mind goes out, that's when it tends to get into all sorts of trouble. The defilements come in, like, for example, jealousy, possessiveness, greed, hatred, anger. These are all the mind going out, quite simply. But when the mind is going in, it doesn't get involved in all of that. It can maintain its peace. But in particular, when it goes to the center of the body, this is where things happen. And this is what the whole of this course has been about, and the kind of inner experiences that arise when the mind's at the center of the body. And when the mind's not at the center of the body, the inner experiences kind of stop. Okay? Well, the more the mind is at the center of the body, the more inner experiences start to occur. And that's just this strange part of the center of the body, is that the Noble Eightfold Path, I'm going on a much deeper level, but the Noble Eightfold Path is not just a theory, it is actually a real pathway that lies at the center of the body. The gateway to this pathway is the center of the body. There's a pathway inwards, and that's what I'll be dealing with much more detail on the next course on inner experiences. But I'll give you a taster of it. That's all. I'll give you a taster of it now. But to open up this doorway that lies at the center of the body, you also have to put the middle way into practice. Okay, so the middle way here is about balancing and finding the middle way, the midpoint between 2 extremes. Okay, midpoint between 2 extremes, and this is a concept which does feature in the scriptures, particularly in a very famous metaphor of I guess you would call it a lute in our terminology, the string of a lute, and having it not too tight and not too loose, and that's when it will make a nice sound. Okay? It's just metaphor. The practice should not be too extreme in either way. There was one monk who was doing his walking meditation, like walking backwards and forwards, and have a little path for it. Usually it's quite a soft path as well, like sand or something like this. So it should be not too, again, the middle way comes in, it should be not too hard and not too soft. Even the pathway itself has its own middle way here, okay? But he walked it so much, so intensively, so focused, so determined, he left blood along the path. His feet were shredded. And the Lord Buddha said, you know, with compassion, you don't need to try that hard. Okay, that's not the middle way here. Even effort can be overdone here. And he tried to moderate it, okay? So moderation, even in the effort we put into the practice, is a big thing. And actually, when we're sitting down to meditate, it's a really big thing. Effort. If you have no effort at all, if you have too much effort, it really is a subtle thing, this effort, okay? You can't say do no effort, because that's also probably not going to work. But if you say apply effort, that's probably also not going to work. So trying to find the middle way between these two extremes, that's quite tricky, okay? It's knowing about when to apply the effort, okay? When to apply the effort and how much effort, okay? Like I gave you an analogy when I was leading meditation of being on the road. And if there's nothing in front of you and there's no problems, you're going in a straight line, well, you don't do anything. You don't steer, you just keep it in the straight line. No effort. It's effortless at that time. But if you start going off to crash into the side of the road, I'm not going to make any effort. You're going to go off the side of the road. Okay. At that point, you're going to have to make some effort. Okay. Simple as that. Okay. So there's a time and a place for this effort. And also, you want to not make too much effort. You're going left and right. You've got to be a gentle touch on the wheel, all right? Not oversteering it. Okay. And very much in the meditation, you have to not oversteer too. You can't say no steering. You can't say oversteering. And what I mean by that is, say for example, you get the thoughts coming up in your mind. In a general way, you get thoughts coming up in the mind. Oh, and we notice this. Wandering mind. Somewhere hung. Trying to calm it down, get it back quiet. And then, well, that's not working. Well, let's go back to breathing out. Okay, breathe it out, chuck it out. Okay, and we might actually overdo things to try and overcome, which is a natural part of the mind. It's going to think. We could have maybe just tried to see if it disappears by itself for a while, and most of the time it does after a short period of time. And it comes back by itself. For example, that would be a slight touch. That's so we could oversteer. We could do something more drastic. But if we do too many adjustments to the mind, continue adjusting it, it won't allow it to really stop still and be natural. You'll still be in beta all the time, basically. So yeah, we have to not over adjust the mind. At the same time, you cannot just not do adjustments. As I said, for example, sleepiness comes on and it's getting stronger. Do nothing, you'll fall asleep. Too late. You have to take some evasive action on these things. So there's a bunch of these pairs or opposites which you have to be aware of, which are extremes. Not too fast, not too slow, not too tight, not too loose, not too hard, not too soft, not too alert, not too relaxed. Okay, I'll give you them a bit slower. But I'm going to, if I may, just read out to you a little bit from a book which I wrote ages ago. Ever since university, I've been writing this book and I've never published it. I don't know if I ever will, but it's a whole book load of it. Now, I'll just give you an excerpt of it, okay? That's relevant. One must be mindful and responsive to the feedback signals of squeezing too tight or losing contact, of over-accelerating or dawdling, and using them to stay in the middle way and generate the quality of equanimity and poise. One must train oneself to be thoroughly familiar and cognitive of these four signals. That was too tight or losing contact, over accelerating, and dawdling. Four signals. Recognizing them the instant they arise and their strength, which will then guide and hone the delicacy of response to them, generating the qualities of subtlety and mindfulness. I'll just interrupt there. So there are these, when we go off course, fortunately, we can actually have an awareness of this. There's a feedback signal. For example, the body gets tense or it starts nodding. There are these feedback signals. They're there. But if we have no awareness, you don't notice them. But with practice, you'll start, oh, you have mindfulness. Ah, that's that signal. Uh-oh, watch out. Okay. But there's also strengths to these things. Sometimes there's a little bit of sleepiness. Sometimes there's real heavy sleepiness. Wandering thoughts can also be the same. Tension can also be the same. All of these have different strengths, and all the obstacles have different strengths. And you use different techniques to deal with different strengths. So you have to be, there's a skill here, okay? I often use a metaphor, somebody bowls something at you in cricket, you have to be able to gauge the speed of the ball, the spin of the ball, and in order to hit it correctly. Same with all the obstacles that come at you. You also have to gain a sense, an appreciation, like the wandering thought. Oh, I can just be neutral and it probably disappear. Oh, this one, I might need to use the mantra now. This one, I think I have to open my eyes. Okay. You have to gain appreciation of the differences. Due to the inflow of spiritual power and energy, there will result a feeling of pleasure and possibly inner light, to which the mind will be strongly attracted to, and to which one should indulge, yet in a restrained way, restraining attachment and excitement. So many of you have already had this kind of experience of feeling, oh, that's nice, getting a nice feeling, a nice happiness feeling, or seeing inner light. Yeah, but don't get attached to that or excited about it. Instead, calmly, gradually easing into this ocean of bliss. So we don't sort of then jump on it, grab, okay? There's this mental grabbing hold of it, okay? Well, instead we just allow ourselves to sink into the experience. It is very easy to bounce off the surface of this ocean if one approaches it with over-eagerness, impatience, excitement, which will create a physical disturbance and tension, thus externalizing the mind once more. If this does happen, one must note which factor caused it, which is to say, heed the intuitive wisdom that will arise in response to the defilement. By virtue of trusting this inner wisdom, we will easily release that thought and feeling and return to stillness, remembering that stillness and emptiness are the causative factors and foundation of inner experience, releasing attachment to the inner experience itself. This is important here. There's cause and there's effect. All these inner experiences, they're just effects. And they only come from the cause, which is you being still and neutral. So there's nothing to get attached to here anyway. That's not the goal of it. The goal here is actually to still the mind and be neutral. Okay. Thus we develop detachment and equanimity, which in turn gives rise to patience and calmness, driving the mind further into stillness and stability. As the mind develops in purity and virtue, the inner experience will become richer, more vivid, clear, and bright, but it may also become more complex. Complexity creates choices, which creates uncertainty and lack of focus. So to be clear, it does not need to be clear. The inner phenomena do not need to be clear or any particular way. If the mind has any preference at this point, then it will get stuck to that preferred perception and halt all progress until this attachment is recognized and released, fixing the mind only on flowing inwards to the center with neutrality. Now, that can happen where you get this crystal ball popping up one after another. Later on, it can happen like this. And your mind goes on, sort of picks up on the crystal ball expanding outwards and or it'll focus. Say you have a Buddha image and you start looking at the face of the Buddha image, the arm of the Buddha image. That can happen too. So you can get too involved in the complexity of it. You just want to ignore, and just keep it neutral, allow it to develop by itself. With repeated practice, with continual practice, these virtues will develop, opening and widening the middle way, driving the mind ever deeper down it, deeper into happiness and deeper into stillness, until the mind adjusts to find the right balance and comes to a complete stop. When it stops, it is just the beginning. So don't stop stopping. Stay still no matter what or how long, with no need to resume thought until the old mind is far, far away and the new, truly tranquil mind has arisen like the full moon, cool and bright. This middle way here is on a deeper level when we have this balance to our mind. Okay, this balance to our mind. It then goes down this inner experience and a new inner experience within that inner experience. Okay, and that is this middle way that I'm talking about here. Not too fast, not too slow. Samarahang, 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 samarahang. This is too fast. Samarahang, samarahang. Probably too slow. Okay, there is a balance to this that works just right. Okay, again with recollecting the crystal ball. Okay, maybe you're like this. Probably going to be too slow for it to gain any traction, any momentum. Okay, if you're like this, recollect, 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 probably going to get tense. Okay, so you'll find there's this natural rhythm to it, and you get into that rhythm, and it's a natural, balanced pace to it. Okay, not too fast, not too slow, not too tight, not too loose. Center of the body. Okay, some people get kind of obsessed about it being like this tiny little dot at the center of the body, exactly 2 fingertips above the navel, right in the middle, to left, to right. Keep it there. Oh, it's moving off to the left, moving off to the right. Oh, get it back, come back. Okay, they're trying to keep it in this little tiny place here. Okay, too far, too tight. Okay, practice. The mind is really quite big anyway, and it'll move around. That's okay. But if it's too loose, it goes to the arm, it goes to the leg. You want to keep it roughly in the center of the body. Okay, there's another balance here. If you're finding it slipping out, then it's probably too loose. Okay, but if it's getting tight, tension, definitely telling you've got it too tight, too focused on a smaller spot. Not too hard, not too soft. Yep, very, very similar thing here. Not paying too much attention. If you're paying too much attention, that's too hard. Pay too little attention, that's too soft. So how much attention you're paying to the center of the body also counts here. Okay, very similar. Not too alert, not too relaxed. Actually, that's half the job of what you're doing in the beginning is getting this, and that's definitely one of the arts of this. Is learning how to get this balance here. So you're trying to stave off sleepiness. Okay, so if you get too relaxed, you can easily just drift off and fall asleep. Okay, so we have many techniques, that we do to stop that from happening. But if we're too alert, and that's usually because we still haven't let go of something, or we haven't properly relaxed. Then, yeah, also the inexperience is not going to arise. You cannot deliberately get that right balance. Okay, you can just avoid the total extremes and get it somewhere in the middle. And if you keep it somewhere in the middle for long enough, it will balance itself out. But if it's towards too far to the extreme, it will just go off the road. Okay. If you get that, then something will start to happen. And at that point, you then have to be not excited or afraid of it. So mind can then lose its balance in the sense of it starts to react in oh, good, oh, bad, one way or the other. Okay. Um, so again, that's again about keeping equipoise, equanimity, which is another key factor of this. And these qualities, all these qualities that we're generating here, will be developing virtues, which will then develop in our external life as well. That's what this mental gym is about. Okay, so whether it's developing this extra mindfulness, well, we'll generate that outside, that's for sure. Equanimity, more equanimity you have in the meditation, more equanimity you have to things in your daily life as well. The more subtlety you generate in meditation, the more you'll do your job in a very detailed, subtle way. It's a very strange thing, but it will cross over all the virtues you're generating, cross over. It's a mental gym. Not desiring and not averse. So, you're seeing something, or you've heard that you can get something in meditation, you want that. That will also throw you off course. Or you get some experience and you don't want that, you reject it. That also is going to throw you off course. Neutral, even in this. If you get that happens, then you start getting this inner experiences, like we talked about last week, in expanding awareness. So gaining the blurring occurs between the body and the external environment. Yes, you get heat, then you get the body becoming numb or heavy and whatever. The body starts to go through some transitional stages, and then it starts to disappear, more or less, until the whole thing disappears. And then once it's disappeared, where are you? Well, you're in some kind of space, okay, some kind of space. And that can feel quite expanded. At that point, in this stage, okay, it can very, like I said last week in more detail on this, where do you go? Where's the center of the body? And the big mistake is to go back to the body. And instead of forgetting about the body, it's done its task. You've gone through the center of the body already. Now you're moving into something beyond the body, beyond the heavy, coarse physical body. Now moving into something more subtle. So when you have this expanded space, you want to be at the center, technically speaking, of that, but you can't measure it. There's no way to measure this center of this space. So what do? Well, the fact is you're already at the center of it. So that's the thing here. It's actually you're already at the center of it, because you came through on the center to get to it. You haven't moved anywhere, so you're actually still at the center of it. The only time when that won't be the case is when you've become attached to something, to the experience. And if you become attached to the experience, you might start sort of expanding with it. Okay, so when it's expanding, oh wow, it's expanding. You sort of attach your mind to the experience of expanding, and you also expand with it, if you get what I mean. Actually, if you just pay no attention to it, you're already at the center of it, and you just stay there. Let it expand. If it's going to expand, let it do its stuff. I'm not interested in it. Okay, you just stay there, and it will continue to expand and change and become more subtle, and then other things will start arising, like light. And once you see the light, and it's just like an ocean of light. After a while, you get these flashes and stuff, but after a while, it turns into an ocean of light. And at the beginning, there's probably no center to it that's very clear. Actually, you're pretty much, you're on the way, right? Just stay neutral. And then usually there arises some kind of part to this light which is brighter than other parts to it. It shows its center to you. And that is now the center, the new center. So we've gone through the center of the body to the center of this spaciousness to the center of this light. And then this light, this source of light, will come towards you. And it might be seen as like a shining sun at the center of this ocean of light. At that point, you pay attention to the center of that. Okay. And this is the principle of the center. Whatever arises, and there's a lot more that arise after that as well. Particularly as we go into the later course, I'll just teach you just how much is beyond that. And there's a lot beyond there, okay? But even getting here, you've done really well. But after this point, that's where it really starts getting interesting. But in the beginning, what might happen is that it expands and another crystal ball pops up. And that's very common. Okay. You just pay attention to the center of the new one, and another one will pop up. So that this one expands and another one arises. And I remember that happened to me once, and it started coming very, very fast, so fast that they were like, the gap between one and the next one was getting very little. So it becomes like ripples out of it. There's, the central one, there's like just many, many, many around it going out. And previously, when I'd had this kind of experience, I would kind of get attached to the new one, because each new one would be like more beautiful or clearer, more immaculate, more shining, radiant than the previous one. And so I'd like look at it and admire it. Okay. And then it would slow down, and I would stay stuck on that one because I'd attached to it. So it was only when I realized that you could just, ignore it, instead where it came from. And where it came from was the center. And at the center is like this bright dot of light. And if you just stay with that bright dot of light, then they come out really fast, and it just ripples out of this twinkling little star at the center of it. And that's actually the correct way. Okay, you just stay at the center, not attaching to what's coming out of it. And that's where it goes down. This is where we're really talking about the center. Countless of these crystal balls. Sometimes it's Buddha images popping up, infinite numbers of them popping up. All the time, the experience is getting stronger and stronger, of happiness, of peace, of purity, all getting stronger and stronger. The light will get brighter and so on, until it reaches this extreme where the mind becomes completely absorbed in it, totally absorbed and still, completely rock solid still. At that point, you fall. For most people, there's an experience of falling at this point, which is what I'm going to talk about next week, falling through the center here. But briefly, that after that arises what we call the actual Dharma, the experience of Dharma, which is what Lomba Wapat Nam discovered. He had this experience, like I'm talking about, before he attained to what we call Dharmakaya. And then on one morning, he sort of decided, I'm going to go for it, okay? And he meditated all the late morning. He said, I won't get up until I hear the drum for the lunchtime. He had a long meditation, let's say. And during that time, he managed to go that bit further until he saw what we call the Dharma sphere, which, even though visually it's quite similar, it's still a sphere. It's still a shining sphere. It's seen from every direction all at the same time, both left and right, up and down, inside and outside, all at the same time, which is quite unusual. And also the happiness was at a completely different level. Now, for most people, that attainment, and even for most monks, that attainment would let them think that I've achieved everything you can achieve in meditation. I've done it. Something for him knew that there was more. And so that he went back that evening and decided, I'm going to meditate to the death, in the same way the Lord Buddha did. And he made this resolution: I will not get up from my meditation seat, even if I was to die on this spot, until I've attained a little piece of what the Lord Buddha attained. And so he did that. He meditated and carried on on this, what we call the Dharma sphere, until this great discovery was that even this, you have to focus at the very center of it. And so when he placed his mind completely focused at the center of that too expanded out, and then the real interesting stuff happened, which I have to tell you about in another course another time. But basically, the Noble Eightfold Path arose at that point, and finally leading him to attaining what we call the Dharmakaya, and sitting behind me, this Buddha inside. The whole Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha was all discovered inside of himself. So there is a sequence of this inner phenomena, and each time it's the same thing: center of that, the center of that, the center of that. Letting go of of the rough, the coarse, the previous, and opening up to the new, the more refined, the more subtle. So we let go of the physical body and go into the spaciousness. And the light arises. We can forget about the spaciousness and go with the light. And then the center of the light arises, of the light, forget about the ocean around it, and so on. Continue living like this. Letting go of the old, embracing new, continually like this. And then it will progress. It goes very, very far, right? But these things, really, they don't just happen in a very gradual way. They can happen in a very sudden way. Bang, all in one go. It really does happen like that. I've known many cases of this. So don't get discouraged and think, oh, I've got so far to go. It could happen at any time. It could happen at any time. You just have to get the right balance and whoosh. Off you go. All right. So, okay, that's my teaching on the center of the center. Next week, we'll talk more on this falling and dealing with that. And that will complete the course on Inner Experiences 1 until we go and deal with that stuff I just touched on lightly in Inner Experiences 2 later on.